Yá'át'ééh, Bene. Good morning, my relatives. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, and we're in the month of September getting into fall. I'm sitting here with my second cup of coffee, and I'm excited this morning to have a conversation with a colleague and someone who's becoming a friend named Katie Graber. She is leading a project that I've been involved on. If you remember a few weeks ago on my social media, I shared some pictures of a writing retreat I was at up in Pennsylvania. And this is the project I'm working on with Katie, where we're developing a resource to kind of educate and help worship leaders sing songs from a global community better within their churches here in North America. And so I'm offering a perspective from the Native community, and there's other people from other parts of the world, and offering different cultural perspectives on what are some of the best ways. And so we're going to have a conversation about that project and about Katie's work this morning. But before we begin, I want to do like I always do. I want to acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what's now called Washington, D.C. My people call it Washington, but these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to state just how humbled I am to be on these lands today. If you notice, I'm in a bit of a different space here. I moved my studio from the room where it has always been in our house for the past 7 or 8 years, and I moved it downstairs into our basement. My wife was working down here for a number of years. She works full time, but her job's remote, and she moved her office to another room. And so this space was open, and I actually had my studio in my bedroom. And so we wanted to clear some more space in our bedroom. And so we moved the studio down here, and I still have a little bit of work to set it up, but I thought I would do this first episode in September from down here. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to kind of make this space my new home, where I have my second cup of coffee and do other video recordings and so on and so forth. I wanted, before we jump into the discussion with Katie, there's a few things I want to update you on. First of all, I just got an email yesterday from my publisher from InterVarsity Press regarding the book Unsettling Truths. As you know, well, maybe you don't know, but this November, it will be the 5th anniversary of when that book was released. It came out in November of 2019. And so this obviously is 2025. And so it'll be the 5th anniversary of the book. And I just got an email yesterday that the book is now in its 11th printing. So it continues to sell fairly well. It has continued to generate a lot of discussion and things, conversations, both in some of the circles I'm involved in, as well as even things more nationally. I know there's a lot of schools that use the book in their classrooms. Both college, graduate programs. I lectured about a year and a half in a law school at San Diego State University, where they were using the book in one of their pre-law classes. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about the conversation this book is generating. And if you would like to get a signed copy of that book, I'm going to put the link in here right here into the chat. But you can get signed copies of Unsettling Truths. You can also get what I call my book study special, where if you buy 10 copies of the book from my website, I will give you and your book study a 45-minute virtual Q&A that you can schedule with me up to a year after you make the purchase. And so it's a great way to kind of bring dialogue to your book study by having one of the co-authors answer some questions. So I do those Q&As a couple times a month usually, and I really love those conversations. They're some of the best discussions that I have. Because people have read the book, they've thought about them, they've got some REM cycles in them, and they've worked through some of their more emotional issues, and we can have some really good conversations about it. Second, after this second cup of coffee, Katie has agreed to join me on my Patreon. If you know, on my Patreon site, it's a subscription website. I use it as a way to keep my voice independent because if you watch my videos on YouTube, you'll know that YouTube puts some commercials on there. You'll see ads on there. I haven't monetized those ads. I get no benefit from those ads. YouTube does that. I specifically decided not to monetize my mainstream social media because I don't want advertisers to have any influence over what I say or what I don't say. And so I figure if I don't take their money, then they can't tell me what I can and cannot say. So I have been intentional not to monetize my social media, but I do have my Patreon site where you can subscribe to different tiers there. The basic tier, you get all of my 7 cups of coffee and other things I put up on YouTube ad-free on there, both audio and video. The second tier is called the Ask Questions tier, where every month I have a Q&A where I'm on there, and whenever possible, I have a Q&A with a guest. And so today, after our 2nd cup of coffee here, Katie and I are going to jump onto the Patreon site. We have a Zoom channel set up, and for people who are subscribed to the Ask Questions tier and above, they can join us for that Q&A. And so I'm going to put the link to my Patreon site in the chat right now. And if you would like to join us afterwards, if you like the conversation that Katie and I are having, you're welcome to join us for a Q&A after this 2nd cup of coffee is over. The third thing I want to talk about, just very briefly, is, as you know, I've been working hard to change my life over this past year. I've started walking, I started eating healthier, I started sleeping more, I started moving more, I started breathing better. And you've gone through all these stages with me. And this past 2 weeks, my last podcast, 2nd Cup of Coffee last week, was called Decolonizing Breath, where I talked about this book I read about breathing and what we need to do to breathe better, and how our culture and our lifestyle really inhibits our good breathing practices. And I figured after I read that book, I'm like, okay, I now have all these things: diet, exercise, movement, sleep, breath, that I need to incorporate into my daily life. I'm not trying to become a health guru. I'm not trying to run ultra marathons. I'm literally trying just to live longer so I can continue doing the work I feel called to do. Initiating the conversations, working towards a national dialogue on race, gender, and class, initiating a Truth and Conciliation Commission, even trying to shepherd these changes through the church and through our nation. And so these past 2 weeks, I've been focusing really hard on how do I incorporate all these things into my daily life. And so yesterday, I had my ideal day. I woke up in the morning, I went running, and I was out for about 2 miles. While I was running, I was at near a field, a football field, and there were some stands where people could watch the game from. And I realized if I went to the top of those stands where the field I was running around, and I waited there, I could see the sun come up over not the horizon, but the tree line, which is just above the horizon. And so I ran yesterday, and then I watched the sunrise, which, again, that's what I should have been doing as a good Navajo for the past all of my life. But when I started watching the sunrise 20 years ago, I didn't incorporate the running. I just did the sunrise. And so I'm thrilled now that I can run and then watch the sunrise. I then walked back to a place where I journal a little bit. I did some journaling, and then I decided to do some writing, but I'm writing by dictation now, or trying to write by dictation. So I did some walking while I dictated my writing. I went to my office about a mile away. I came back from my office for lunch, had lunch with my wife, and then I walked that afternoon. I had a phone call, which I took walking, and I did a walk during that phone call. I went to the grocery store, picked up some things for dinner, had another phone call, walked during that phone call, and then that evening after dinner, I went for my evening walk. And when I got into bed, I had done 30,000 steps, which I was thrilled about, because I was a little sore, but I wasn't trying to do, I will admit that towards the end, I was trying to get 30,000 steps, but I wasn't trying to get that high. I was able to incorporate. I had a very productive day, and I was able to move all throughout the day. And I went to bed feeling very good about the things I accomplished that day, but also feeling great about the amount of movement I was able to have in my body throughout the day. And so I felt like, yeah, this is what I want to start doing almost every day. I don't know if I'll do 30,000 steps every day, but I love the fact that I was able to do my work while moving. And that's been one of the goals of this entire last year is how do I incorporate more healthy activities, not just so I can become a health guru, but so I can actually just be healthier doing the work I want to do. So anyway, that is my that's what I'm really excited about. I'm thrilled to see that happen, and we'll see how it goes the rest of this week. But anyway, enough about me. Let me see who's online right now. I see we have Mr. Phil Fox. Yá'át'ééh. Mr. Phil Fox, thanks for joining this morning. It's good to have you on. I know there's other people who are on this morning. I see there's quite a few people online. So shout out my relatives. Thank you for joining. And let me now bring on Katie, and we will start our discussion regarding the work that she's been involved in. So Katie, Yá'át'ééh, thank you for joining me. I'm drinking my second cup of coffee. I think you have water. I'm not sure what you brought with you this morning.
Yeah, I need another cup of coffee, but this is at least my second bottle of water today.
Okay, so let me introduce you just a little bit, Katie. I'm going to read your bio here. So Katie works at the University of Ohio. Her areas of expertise are ethnomusicology, music and race in the U.S. history, opera, Mennonite music, critical theory, critical race theory, and affect theory. Your research focuses on race, ethnicity, immigration, and colonization in a variety of contexts, including Western opera, the history of ethnomusicology, and Mennonite music. You have served as co-chair of the Society for Ethnomusicology Voice Special Interest Group and as intercultural editor for the Mennonite Church in the USA and Mennonite Church Canada's denominational hymnal Voices Together. In the latter role, you have worked with a variety of consultant groups and individuals to edit more than 40 languages in hymn texts of multiple musical traditions. She has presented her research at numerous national and international Mennonite and ethnomusicology gatherings. Katie, that's quite a bio. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, and I'm thrilled that you could join me for my second cup of coffee this morning.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk when I shared some pictures a few weeks ago about the writing retreat that I was on. One of the things I loved about that retreat is there was no real agenda, right? We didn't have meetings or we weren't doing learning every day. We ate 3 meals together, the 5 or 6 of us who were there, but our days were pretty much just writing. Mm-hmm. And I remember all of you would go off and sit in your desk and write, and I was doing dictation. So I would be walking around and doing my writing or doing my dictating. But it was a really great time of having, I think we had 2.5 days out in the mountains in Pennsylvania, just to kind of focus on the pieces that each of us were writing and to kind of get into our own groove of getting that content out and then having meals together to dialogue and talk about these things. Mm-hmm. That was one of the most relaxing kind of retreats or work retreats I'd ever been on. And I really enjoyed it. I loved how you set it up. And so I shared some pictures there, and people on my social media really liked them. They wanted to know more about the project. So I thought, what a great time to bring you on. So can you let us know a little bit about this project? Like, how did this project come together? Who's funding it? What is the goal for this project? What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, I was approached by Adam Tice at GIA Publications. So GIA publishes hymnals and choral music and some school music and books as well. So it used to be a Catholic publisher, but now it's more ecumenical and even secular things as well. So Adam was a colleague of mine on the Voices Together Mennonite hymnal. And as you read in my bio, I did a lot of intercultural work there. And so he works for GIA and approached me about creating this handbook about global music in Christian denominational and other types of publications. So it's happened over 50 years and more that North American Christian publications have come to incorporate global song from around the world, here and around the world, because whatever is global song that's an interesting history as well. What gets called global and what doesn't. But it's time to kind of stop and take stock of what has become the typical repertoire that continues to be used and published and republished, and look at those songs and ask how they represent and misrepresent music cultures and people around the world. So I have gathered a group of scholars and practitioners from around the world and living in the United States. It's some professors, ethnomusicologists, some church musicians, and some scholars like yourself, to ask the questions about what do you see in the repertoire that's there, and what is it saying and not saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I could ask you going off of this. Um, I'll just tell my little piece of it, and then we'll go from discussion there. As some of you may know, my grandparents, my grandmother, my grandfather, my father's side, my Navajo grandparents were both boarding school survivors. And my grandfather went on to work as a translator for some of the Dutch missionaries who worked for the Christian Reformed Church. And one of the things that he did is he helped translate some of the hymns into Navajo. So the Navajo Church, and it's not just one denomination, the Navajo Church, Navajo Christians on the reservation, we have a Navajo hymnal that has hymns, and it was written almost maybe 100 years ago. I don't know when it all came together, but 50, 75, 100 years ago. And my grandfather helped translate some of those hymns. He also helped translate the Bible into Navajo. And our Navajo people love that hymnal. Like, it's probably their second most sacred book behind the translated Navajo Bible, the Bible that's translated into Navajo. And they sing from it. People have their favorites. They just call out the numbers and everyone knows what song is being sung. But one of the things that they had my grandfather and the other translators do is when they translated the songs, they didn't change the tune. And so Navajo is a tonal language. So the length of the tone, the length of the syllable or the length of the word, the intonation of your voice changes the meaning of the word. So to and to are two different words. And so when you keep the tune, you stretch the syllables to fit the tune, you go up and down according to the tune. And back in the day when my grandfather was translating, the congregations actually had to read the hymns before they sang them, because if they only sang them, they had no idea what they were saying because it sounded like gibberish to them. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the work that I've been involved in regarding contextualized worship and kind of global music and things like that has been, we need to find a way to allow cultures to worship fully within the context of their own culture. And one of the pieces that I'm bringing into this project is I'm writing about what is the best practice and the best way for congregations in the United States to sing indigenous songs and bring indigenous music into their churches. And one of the things that's going into the essay I'm contributing to this project is that if you want to sing our songs, you really need to have a relationship with us. Not with just some native person, but if you want to sing a Cherokee song, you need to be in relationship with the Cherokee. If you want to sing a Choctaw song, you need to be in relationship with the Choctaw. If you want to sing a Navajo song, you need to be in relationship, not just an individual, but with your church needs to be in relationship with Choctaw or Navajo Christians. And through that relationship, then learn those meanings and learn how to best sing those songs and incorporate that music into their congregations. And so that's very much been my voice and what I've been advocating for and what I've been talking about for the past 20 years regarding indigenous music and kind of native culture within the context of Christianity. Do you see similar things in I'm not going to say indigenous cultures, but in other cultures around the world, in the way the church kind of co-ops or brings that cultural music or that cultural style or even that language into this American context, and for the sake of the Western audience, changes it to make it more palatable or easier for them to understand or to
Yeah.
know and even to sing.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a pretty parallel history, maybe not exactly at the same time, but in the 19th century and early 20th century, when Western missionaries were going to North American indigenous places and around the world, the first thing they said was, "You can't sing your music. It's not worthy. It's associated with non-Christian religion. It's not." I mean, there was this idea that Western music was more sophisticated, more civilized, more intellectual, and therefore more worthy of singing in worship. And so we have to replace all of your music with our Western music and do all these translations. And yeah, there are so many stories like you described of the translations losing meaning because of tonal languages or cultural references and things. And then there have been around the world as well movements of reclaiming culture and and using native songs and worship practices in Christian worship. And so North American white Anglo Christians, in a true earnest desire to expand our idea of God's family and who God is and who God's family is, we want to incorporate the diversity of songs into North American hymnals. And there is also, I mean, there's a lot of multiracial congregations as well. We want to resource those congregations and then also celebrate the more metaphorical connections we have around the world. But as with any ethnomusicological history, when people go out and collect songs, it's spotty, and there are problems with translating non-Western songs into Western notation as well, not just the words, but also the music. That Western notation can't describe a lot of musical traditions around the world. So there's all kinds of mistranslations and misrepresentations that can happen, even with the best intentions. And it wasn't always even the best intentions in history as well, when missionaries were trying to suppress indigenous cultures.
So, what's your hope for this book, this resource that we're producing? What if you could dream? Like, what would you like to see this book accomplish? Who would you like to get it into? Whose hands would you like to get it? What impact would you like to see it have on congregations around the country?
The hope is that worship leaders and song leaders would be able to use this book to understand what and why they are singing, so that they can enter into the practice with more knowledge, more humility, and a sense of, as you say, relationship, rather than the older idea of, we go out and take something and then I can bring it into my worship and use it as tokenism, or there's all kinds of ways that you can appropriate music. But I think the goal would be to allow and encourage people to use to engage in music as an entry point to relationship and understanding each other, rather than just kind of a token.
Yeah. I have to ask you, Katie, because it's on your bio, and I need to I'm going to get the phrasing here so I say it correctly. With all of this stuff on ethnomusicology and history of race and everything else, you have another focus on opera.
Yeah.
I am really intrigued. Does opera play into this? Or is
Um,
that kind of just a whole side interest or another interest that doesn't relate to some of these other issues? I'm really curious if you see some of this playing out in the opera vein of your work.
yeah, it's definitely all intertwined. So my dissertation was about opera in Chicago in the late 19th century. And that was a time after the Great Fire of 1871 when they were rebuilding the city. And opera at one point in history was popular music. You know, people would get the sheet music to play on their pianos at home before was recording devices. That's how popular music was circulated. And people would go to the theater to see opera. And it was kind of, there was a raucous atmosphere there. It wasn't just like sitting there quietly the way we do today. So that whole sort of cultural context is similar to the ideas of musical hierarchies that we see in church music, both between and people still receive these vestiges of these 100-year-old ideas that Western music is more superior and more complicated and more sophisticated. People don't usually say that out loud, but they say it in other words, such as complaining about contemporary worship music being overly simplistic, and some non-Western music that is just a melody only, like, oh, that's just not as sophisticated and complex as what I like to sing. Is, people will uphold harmonized music over that. So we see that in opera history, as opera became more of that, it's considered more higher class. Now you're supposed to dress up and go and sit quietly and pay a lot of money to go to opera. So the ideas of the musical hierarchy, and also in my dissertation, I looked at the immigration patterns and labor and ethnicity, um, and that was bound up in the 19th century. People thought of Germans and Italians as completely separate races, and their vocal, I mean, like, they thought of them as physically different and able to produce a different kind of voice. And but yet you could be German and learn to sing in the Italian style. So there was this idea of really separate races, but yet this idea that you could overcome these differences and learn to embody a different racial type of singing. And I mean, this was very much the case as well for African American and Indigenous American. People thought of like physical, biological differences that allowed different kinds of musical capabilities. So all of this in the 19th century, the missionaries and missionizing, and kind of separating out people, separating out um, musical practices, and creating these hierarchies of people and musical practices, and and deciding where people fit and what music um, is worthy of different types of practices, and both in worship and like the concert hall and things. And like I said, I think we receive the vestiges of those ideas still today. And so this project on global hymnody, I think, is one way to get past this. Um, if we can enter into and learn about one another's musical practices, I think that's a way to humanize one another, and to see that musical complexity and sophistication really is just an idea, and you can, if you learn the other people's musical languages, you can learn about different kinds of complexities and musical meanings.
Yeah, we're running a little bit out of time here, but I wanted to ask you one other question. So much of your work revolves around, you could say, decolonizing or kind of exposing the racism foundationally in some of our musical traditions and things like this. Um, what is it that gives you, as you look at where we've come from especially using music in missions and where we're going and where we're at. What two things? What is it that gives you hope? Okay, we've accomplished some things. We've changed a few mentalities and a few ideas. And what do you see as, but we have this other massive amount of work to do that keeps you waking up every morning and continuing to go down? Like, what are the two? Where do you feel like, okay, yeah, we've made some progress. We've decolonized these things, or we've taught some of these things. We've made these changes, but we have this other hill or mountain or chasm we need to cross or climb.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I see more and more openness to different kinds of music all over, and I think the next generation, I teach college students about world music, uh, my two big classes this semester are World Music Survey and Ohio Soundscapes. So learning about the history of Ohio and Columbus through sound, and the questions and observations that college students make give me hope. I mean, I can see the hierarchies and biases changing over time, um, but not everyone. I mean, there are uh, still assumptions that people make about different kinds of music, and so there's more to be done. And in Christian music, I would say the denominational hymnals, and ecumenic. I keep saying denominational hymnals, but all kinds of publications. The willingness to try to expand is great, but we need more awareness of, even with good intentions, what kinds of ideas are we replicating. So there's still more work to do.
Yeah. Well, Katie, I really am grateful for the opportunity to be on this project with you.
I am very grateful for your contributions.
I'm excited to see how this resource will be used and what will be said. There's another Native woman, a Choctaw woman, who has just now become one of the collaborators on this project. And I met with her yesterday, and we talked some about the work she's doing and the voice she's going to bring into some of the writing. And so it's really good to connect with her yesterday. But I thank you for taking some time. Thank you for joining me for a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing? You asked about funding at the beginning, and I did want to say that the Hymn Society of United States and Canada has contributed to this project, and the Calvin Institute for Christian Worship was a big grant that allowed that writing retreat and a lot of the travel that you're going to do, and lots of other things. So grateful for those funding sources.
Yeah, I think I've worked with both those institutions. I spoke at the Hymn Society several years ago, and I've been a collaborator with John Whitbleed and others at the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship for almost 2 decades now.
That's the first place that I heard you speak, was it?
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's great that they're both invested in this project. So for those of you who are watching, I see Jordan Lott, Yá'át'ééh, Jordan, thanks for joining. I appreciate your being part of our discussion today. I know Mr. Phil Fox was on here earlier. I know there's several others who are on here. If you would like to join Katie and I for a Q&A on my Patreon site, I shared that link a bit earlier in the podcast, but I'm going to put it once again in the chat here. And if you're watching this later, if you're watching this as a podcast, you download it, or you come back to my YouTube channel or Facebook to watch it later, you can still join the Patreon. I archive all of our Q&As up there, and you'll be able to, if you join the Ask Questions tier, you'll be able to access the Q&A that Kate and I are going to have this morning as well. I have this website for you. It's your faculty page at Ohio State. And I'm going to share this. There, you said there's some resources on this link that people can access. Is that correct, Katie?
Yeah, there are a few links to articles I've written at the bottom.
Okay, great. So if you want to learn more about Katie's work and about some of the projects she's been in and some of the articles she's written, you can view her faculty page at Ohio State. I just put that link into the chat. But Katie, thank you for joining me today. All of my relatives, I appreciate you joining me for my second cup of coffee. I hope your day goes well today. And I'm looking forward to talking. I may even do another second cup of coffee later this week. I usually just do once a week now as I'm getting into a new schedule, but I may end up doing another one this week. I'm not sure yet. So watch my social media and I'll put some notifications out if I'm going to do that. But my relatives, walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. And we'll join you if you want on the Patreon on Zoom in about 5 minutes if you want to jump over there if you're watching from there. So, Asha, my relatives, hakone.